curtain. I'll introduce you, sir. Make an entrance, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Breakout Session 5. Here to discuss assessments measuring communication impact, please welcome Ms. Laura DeFrancisco and Lieutenant Colonel Kamil Sztalkoper from OCPA Assessments.
Need some music to come out on an entrance like that. Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's late in the day. Wow, that light's really bright. Okay. Yeah, the last breakout session for the day, so I really appreciate you sticking around to hear us out on this. I'm Laura, Kamil. We've already been introduced, so we'll just jump right into it. Sorry. So what we want to talk to you about today is kind of go through what we've been doing the last year with assessments at OCPA, communicating, measuring the effectiveness of our communication, which is what we've been charged to do, and give you a background, kind of what led us to where we are today, thinking about a way forward. You've heard from General Hanna now, you've heard from the Secretary, the Vice Chief. There's a lot of changes coming and how we're looking at communication in general, which will impact how we assess it as well. And then I do want to kind of say up front, we don't necessarily have this great takeaway for you that you can run back and use to assess your communications where you are, but I do want to just explain to you kind of the intricacies and the complexity of this, of what we've been dealing with, and that we are moving forward. There's been a lot of change over the year, and we think we're on the right path to get something good. So quick on the background. So I'm not sure if anybody heard Lieutenant Colonel Ochoa's presentation this morning on the communication plan, but when we started this last year, we were working on the FY18 communication plan that had, everything was derived from the Secretary of the Army's priorities, which came out of the campaign plan. They've changed a little bit, but this was our starting point. So communicating the Army priorities was what our big focus was. How are we doing communicating these priorities? I'm not expecting you to read the fine print, but this is just to show you, again, the intricacies of all of this. So we have the 6 Army priorities, and then the 6, we started with 7 audiences, but now we're down to 6. We got rid of the key influencers because they're not necessarily a standalone audience. But the audiences that we're trying to communicate to, and it was the different communication objectives aligned from the priority to that audience. A lot of work, a lot of words, a lot of potential data, very cumbersome. So also, this is all still from the FY18 communication plan. So I know this is old. We've got a new one coming out, which is going to be a lot better. Always improving, right? So this was the assessment plan. A lot of the objectives and the measures of performance. We went with this trying to figure out these aren't necessarily communication objectives. That was the first thing we identified. When you had the campaign plan and we were laying out, this is what the Army wants to do moving forward as an Army, as an entity, as a business, if you will, business goals, and we made communication objectives out of that. They're not, as I said, they're not actually communication objectives. So we're trying to cull that down and make it more in line with how we're communicating. It's too wordy, and it's too, as you know, and trying to come up with messaging for these things, it's too complex, and so we're really trying to streamline it. So from this, we were tasked with, and again, backing up just a little bit, we were looking at the audiences first. We were assessing our key audiences. How well did we do communicating to the American public this month? Wow, really? Okay, what did you want to communicate? It was very complex. Who owns that? Who do we get this information from? And we were looking at media and social media. So after a few months of trying to do that, we kind of tilted a little bit and went with the priorities. Let's look at the priorities. How well do we communicate readiness? How well do we communicate modernization? What stories are considered readiness, modernization, reform? And so we started looking at it from that lens. And again, still kind of complex. General Jones tasked us he wanted a framework. We need to build a framework that we can look at the measures of performance, measures of effectiveness. What are the indicators? So we moved forward and got a framework, and I'm going to turn it over to Kamil in a second because he's going to walk through that. Just, again, this is more to show you the work and effort that went into this, and it was started really, really big, and we're whittling it down to make it a little bit more manageable. But all the various inputs that go into what we do to do an assessment each month. And I'll turn it over to Kamil.
Clicker, thank you. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I get to walk. Laura's still working on the leg there. So right here, what you see in front of you is just one of the 6 Sec Army priorities, readiness. This document, when it's printed out, is a 11 by 17 inch document that has key performance indicators, MOPs, MOEs, and all the KPIs were just based off of a light level of research, what we thought could have been accomplished over the previous year. And I wish I could kind of zoom in on all of these, but readiness affects all 6 of our audiences. So there's all 6 of these, and we're probably going to implement this going kind of forward. But this document is what data do we want to collect, along with from what sensors, to kind of give us a small part of our assessment. There are a lot of inputs. And so next several slides go over a lot of our inputs. So one of the inputs that some of you may or may not have seen, I know Colonel Lawhorn has seen this for the past several months, this was sent out to all the ACOMs, DRUs, and ASCCs. And what we're looking for is, did your senior leader at your level do any of this on the left side? Congressional engagements, media, foreign media, visits to industry plant of a Boeing, Sikorsky, key influencers. Are you talking to CASAs? We added recently in the May sensor parades or public speaking events, town halls, and going off the 6 priorities in the top. But then we added things like Army housing, and then we also added, for May, Memorial Day. And this is just specifically numbers. We're looking how many of these things did you do? So yes, clearly a measure of performance. But also, we asked each of the PAOs for the ACOMs, DRUs, ASCCs at the very bottom to kind of, hey, give us your assessment at the very bottom. So give us an anecdotal 2-3 sentences of what do you think, where is your command at for that particular month? And we're just looking for the principle for that command. And like in the conversations with FORSCOM, they started giving us information from the corps. Ideally, if this would go down all the way to the brigade combat teams, there would be a lot of data to compile and to code. One thing that we have been also asking for specifically in this particular document is unit-owned reach and engagement for social media. So we're talking about specifically Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We get reach and engagement for those 4 from OCPA's DMD division. So we're like, hey, what else is the Army doing reach and engagement-wise to kind of show what is our overall reach? Now, is there some duplication in the data, potentially? Yes, there is, but it's data that we own that can show us what is the overall reach and the potential. So that is a monthly document that we pushed out to the 4-star, 3-star commands, and that we've been asking for. So one input. So we take that particular input and combine it with 11 by 17 document, and we kind of start throwing in numbers into what hopefully you can see in the far back row over there because you're hiding. So for instance, we're looking at number of articles about readiness. That data we get from our media relations division and their contract team using Meltwater, Crimson Hexagon, TVIs, you name it, print and broadcast articles that are on readiness. So we do have the tools to code not only automatically, but sometimes there is some manual coding involved to kind of get us to like some of these specific numbers. But once we get old numbers, and for this one, we're actually showing you 4 months worth of data for 1 of 10 slides here. And yes, it's measure of performance, it's just numbers, but are the numbers going up or down? But this has to be kind of compared against what is the anecdotal input at the bottom of the previous slide that the POs are providing us, but also we have to have a discussion with the media relations division of what are some of the major things happening, or what are some of the driving factors. But we also compare this with products that are produced in plans by Lieutenant Colonel Ochoa and some of her teammates of what was the previous focus for that month. Okay, it's readiness. Are we pushing readiness stories? And it's very easy for us to push readiness stories by our own social media, on our own social media platforms, because we control them. Pitching stories to the media, that's a little bit harder. So another product. And then, so at the end, we kind of have an assessment here on the far right. So I give a little data. Ms. Laura kind of looks at the data, comes up with an assessment. She's looking at a couple other products as well that I'll show you. But then we also try to place a triangle on this thermograph, red, amber, green. So I showed this product. There is no algorithm for this very top. It is basically, Laura, here's the numbers. Let's have some discussions. We do inputs. We have an assessment working group on Mondays. And all this information gets kind of like put together. Do we need to move it? Should we be moving this triangle? This document was shown to a team of PR individuals at Edelman a couple months ago. And they're like, how do you guys get this? This is great. CEOs will appreciate this. Triangle on the red, amber, green. Not really all this on the bottom. They're like, wow, we're getting third-party validation. We're doing something right. How is this possible? Even though it's not really kind of scientific. But okay, cool, third-party validation. Let's continue forward. Do we want to get away from it? Yes, but it's something that translates to when you put 6 of these red, amber, greens, you'll see on the slide later. So another set of inputs. So on the left side is a monthly media relations division product that's put together usually heavily using meltwater and TVIs for print and broadcast, and definitely using meltwater for Facebook and Twitter. Data, just numbers, stories coded per the 6 priorities, and we do code stories multiple ways. So a particular story 6 months ago was maybe coded one way, readiness. But stories can definitely be readiness, modernization, people values. So that's very important. So we took MRD stuff on the left, and on the right side is a digital media division product they produce every month. And since they control the numbers, it's 5 pages of reach, engagement, likes, shares, how are we doing against the other military services, you name it. But lastly, to actually measure the effectiveness, we did some surveys. So this particular survey, Perceptions of the U.S. Army by American Adults, was executed through the Office of People Analytics, which are on the 9th floor in this building, through the Joint Advertising Marketing Research Studies Group, or JAMRS. They do multiple surveys throughout the year, every month. This particular survey was the current events tracker. So they survey 1,000 American adults aged 18 and over, and they do kind of break it down, male, female, age brackets, and there is a weight applied to those individuals to make sure it's representative of the U.S. population, verified against census data, and 1,000 is statistically significant since it gives us a 3.1% sampling error. New York Times, Washington Post will use surveys off of 1,000 people, maybe 1,200. Anything, if you want to go to 10,000 people and drop your sampling error down to, let's say, 2.1% or less, you can do it, but it costs a lot more money. 1,000 works for this particular purpose. So we asked the 4 questions on the left in December of 2018 and February of 2019, and these 4 questions align with our communication objectives for the American people audience, not only in the previous plan, but in the new plan going forward as well. So going forward, Laura and I can actually make a recommendation to Robin with a very specific percentage to create a SMART objective going forward of, you know what, over 1 quarter, we saw an increase of 4% for the top 2 questions. You know, so based off of just 1 quarter, if we're going to make a communication objective going forward, let's just aim for a 5% increase of increasing awareness for the American people along the readiness, that the Army is ready to fight and win the nation's wars. I can support that based off of this particular research. Question, front row, second row, sorry. So they call different people every month, basically. So they keep calling, reach them via traditional landline or cell phone until they reach 1,000. So it is nationwide. Yes, randomly nationwide. And there is a weight applied to make sure the demographics equal out. There's a whole bunch of PhDs up there to do the math, but it's a very good question. I have never questioned the data, but the question you're asking was asked at a similar director of the Army staff hosted communication GOSC several months ago, and there are SCSs and 2 and 3 stars that were asking, like, 1,000 people, is that enough? Or should we be asking more? I'm like, for the money and all the doctors and PhDs that are doing the math up here, this is significant. So I saw another hand somewhere. So this cost us $0. So big success. Otherwise, you want to do surveys, you're paying a whole bunch of money. And people up here are doing it every day, every month. And they're also asking questions of potential recruits. Jammers is also asking questions of soldiers that just entered basic training. And they're asking like 10, 15 questions. So there's a lot of data out there, but this was a big win for us of, hey, you know what? Do we really have a communication challenge or a communication opportunity? And based off of this, looking at all the green, I think we're doing pretty good. But we have also challenged people, like, look at the amber and the red. There's changes over there as well. So that's one audience. The second one is Army colonels that work at OSC Joint Staff in the Pentagon, Army 06s. There's 426 of them. Go figure. So they attend a monthly breakfast in the Pentagon with a 3 or 4 star and a couple of Army 2 stars, about 15 to 20. But we wanted to gather their perceptions of their peers of the other services on the Joint Staff about the questions you're seeing right here, specifically. Army readiness, readiness of relevant joint force, multi-domain operations, et cetera, et cetera. And so this was the result of the very first survey. The survey was given to him hard copy at the breakfast and returned immediately afterwards. So one of the things is, did they kind of, I see a photo there, Stacey Hopwood, no pictures. Yeah. So one of the questions we thought, like, did they read the survey correctly? Because did they think we were asking them the question? But we wanted the question of, what do you think your Navy or Air Force counterpart thinks about these? So that's one of the kind of errors that we kind of have been kind of discussing. But it led us to some interesting insights. After doing this for 3 months, multi-domain operations has been a big, they really don't know. We push more products to Army colonels, and not only Army colonels, but the other services at OSC Joint Staff. From this survey that we showed to the Director of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Martin, several months ago, he did say, hey, take this, and I want you to push it out to all Army 06s assigned to global joint billets, which is 710. And we got an approval from the Army Research Institute to execute their survey last week, and that should be going out here shortly. These same questions, plus a couple other ones on talent management. So a lot of inputs, 2 surveys that now leads to this fun thing you've probably seen that has traditionally been preceded by a red, amber, green bubble chart of, you did not give us your data and you're in trouble, which, sir, you've seen in the past. I apologize.
Thanks, Kamil. Okay, so all of that input that we get every month, whether it's the surveys, whether it's the checklists that get filled out, how many people out there have gotten our checklist, have filled in our checklist? Couple hands. Oh, couple hands. Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Is that a question or a? Question about the checklist. Yeah. I've been out in the building for a year at this point, so it may be dated, but is that information coming up, or are we drowning the ERUs and the ASCCs and subordinates asking for the same information in different sections, or is that information pulled up by one OCPA element asking, and it's permeated across the OCPA section? That each one of our subordinates is Yeah.
and you use the same information in 3 different formats, and you're using it a certain way, somebody else. Is that happening, or somebody taking that into consideration?
No, I appreciate that, and we did think about that when we came up with the checklist. That checklist is specifically for us for assessments, and it's specifically data we're looking for that fills in that chart. I have asked, and I haven't asked recently, and I should probably ask again, if people are already sending up information in some other format, we are happy to take that because we don't want to put extra work on people. But and some of that data that we're collecting, we probably won't be needing as much of it in the future. We get AARs on things, but it's like piecemeal, and sometimes it isn't, we're looking for who's the audience. Like if a senior leader goes out and speaks, I want to know who they're talking to, roughly how many, and basic information about that audience, and then what messages were delivered. That's all I need to know. And if there's any kind of feedback, how well it was received based on questions that get asked or something like that. I don't know that there's a consolidated report like that monthly. I mean, if there is something like that by each command, we would love to have that. So in lieu of that, we do our checklist. I'd be happy to get rid of the checklist if I knew we could get some data on a regular basis from people. I don't know if I answered your question. Absolutely. Sure. We haven't gotten any pushback on this that I know of.
1 or 2 people have done pushback when they're like, "Oh, you need this today? I didn't know about it." We traditionally have been giving individuals 7 to 10 business days to give us input from the previous month, and we also have accepted products that already exist. I know TRADOC, AMC, and USASOC already produce certain documents that are social media heavy, that provide like the reach and engagement of all the social media platforms. We're like, perfect, give it to us, and we'll take that and take it into consideration. I know for like congressional engagements, we utilize a weekly OCLL product that kind of like, oh, it's really good. Now, is there a potential duplication of data slightly? Sure, there is. But I think the other thing people just need to remember, this has only been really happening since October. We're collecting data, and this needs to go out for at least 1 full year to see what data do we get and make some kind of adjustments, even though everyone's adjustments every 30 days. It's hard to adjust every 30 days. Something different happens here every month. Certain things happen the same every year, and that's been kind of our struggle, like, hey, slow down, make some adjustments. I think we have just gotten to the point of we now have an opportunity and 6 months worth of data to kind of make some adjustments and to kind of simplify reporting systems and processes. So, question in the back, right? Hold on, Colonel Lachlan had a question first, and then we can show.
Well, I want to follow up on one thing on that question as well. We never fully identified how far down into commands we were looking for data, because you could go crazy with trying to pull all of that up from brigade level. I mean, if we had it, great, but we were basically looking for the 3-star or maybe even division commander, that kind of level. So hopefully it wouldn't be a huge ask, but I understand the concern of over tapping, yeah.
And I do have
one
last thing. We can go through the 2 questions. I did go as far as talking to Facebook here in DC. Like, hey, would it be possible for me to get just reach and engagement from these 10 Facebook pages? For example, being FORSCOM, TRADOC, 101st, 82nd. And they staffed it through their policy team here in DC, and unfortunately, given their current issues they're experiencing, they said no. Do I want admin rights to all several thousand Facebook pages? No. But if Facebook could give me reach and engagement for all Army pages, so one thing less for you to report, I get the data automatically, and then now I have a much more true understanding of reach and engagement. So we have explored options of lightning load and what's going on. There has been a lot of research for us as well of how can we simplify what we're doing. So.
Okay, so, sorry. Yes, sir.
We've tried to scrape some of that social media data off of their website to look at it, because what I'm trying to do for them is at least be consistent in what I provide them. And I'm not going to be able to provide, I don't want to provide a whole lot this month that I'm not going to be able to provide next month this month with business. So let them make their assessments on a consistent set of data.
That's
What I've tried
a
to
good
do
point.
is that original checklist, I've tried to have that conversation with my DRUs and say, okay, as we have a monthly phone call, these are the three things that I'm going to ask you to look at. And one of the things I do appreciate that has made it a little bit better is I get almost a weekly email from you guys reminding me where we are in this process, because the first 3 months it was, oh shit, that's okay. I don't have anything this month because I forgot that we did. But now I get a weekly email from them, here's where we are in the process, you have 3 weeks, you have 2 weeks, and I can take that and send that to my DRUs and remind them where we are in the process. And so I just asked for a couple of, we try to focus on a couple of qualitative statements about where you think you are in your information environment, and then just try to focus on that. Because when we've had this conversation, I'm not a big fan of the social media reach and engagement as a measure of anything, because I'm in the process of looking at our Facebook page. I can tell you on the Forcecom Facebook page, the first 25 likes or engagements are always some little icon that's obviously from some bot that says something, go America, or we love you, or what. And I'm like, well, I don't know how much of this is worth.
Okay, so oh, sorry. Okay.
Now, the question to that would be in the future.
Yep.
I would assume that once we get a balance on this, we would want to understand at least some significant engagements and maybe if there are superstar training generals, 3-star training generals, maybe out there too.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree because I know, we all know, there's a lot going on at all levels that we're just not capturing. And if something, I always say, if somebody at a command somewhere pushes up an AAR of some event they did, if it went up to the next level, if it was important enough to send up, it kind of keeps going up, if you will. So reports that go into the Secretary of the Army every week and the Chief of Staff of the Army, and we see those, I'm like, well, that's what they figured is significant. I'm going to take those things. So, yeah, I would love to go beyond, but we also don't want to overtask folks. So real quickly, I don't want to dwell on these next 2 slides, but some of you have seen these before. This is what we do with all the information that we collect from the field. So we break it down again by the Army priority. There's an objective written there. It's not necessarily the objective we were focusing on that month. This is where we need to get better, but it's just kind of a generic objective for that priority. And then how well we did, it's performance-based. Did the numbers go up? Did the numbers go down? Because we don't necessarily have, our monthly communication plan will focus on one thing. So like one month it was modernization. So if modernization moved, if we had a lot more engagements and our message was put out a lot more, or it was kind of tepid, that's because we were actually trying to communicate something that month specifically. The rest of it is just what else happened, because there's a lot of just things happening out there. You all are doing things not necessarily in line with that monthly plan because you're carrying on your regular duties. You're doing your job, your own plans at your own level, and focused on your own priorities, which we totally understand. So some of that is what's filtering in on the other priorities. So that's kind of what this is. Getting to the effects, the measuring the effect is where we're lacking, I think, in trying to get social media comments, actually drilling down into that or something. I know that's where General Hannah's going, is actually the content analysis of things. Is our messaging penetrating? And back with the surveys, trying to understand if we have a baseline, if things move, is it because of our communication efforts? Well, we'll take credit for it if it does well. But so that's kind of where we're moving forward. Now, this very busy slide, again, you're not going to be able to read all of that, but We take the media report that comes in, and the social media, the traditional media, and then we do focus this on what was the communication objective for that month. What were we trying to achieve? Did we meet it or not? And then a recommendation and takeaway for moving forward. So for instance, when we did modernization 1 month, before we would say, okay, what's a recommendation for next month? Well, we're too late. We're already executing next month because we're assessing last month. Okay, what's the next time we're going to talk about modernization? Well, it might not be for a few more months. And now I'm thinking, if modernization was the focus in the month of March, it may be that again next year. Should it be or should it not be? How well did we do? And that's where we're trying to go forward with this. It's not as much how well did we do, but where are we lacking? Did messages not go out? Did something dip? Did something not resonate? How do we need to tweak that? Was it the message? Was it the person delivering the message? Was it the way it was delivered? And so we're trying to look more into that to improve our communication. I'm going to move off that because, okay. So one way I see us moving forward, we did a Army housing kind of deep dive, really looking at the media. This doesn't necessarily include comments on social media, but we were looking at the stories and where it went from the time of the hearing in February up through March 25th. So the stories and the takeaway was, and you heard the secretary when we went out and talked about it and really got it out there, our message is going to get carried. When leaders talk, when the senior leaders talk, it trickles down to every echelon. And the more they talk, the more your message is going to be out there. I know it seems kind of obvious, but when you show leaders this, look at how much our message got through. We wanted to do the little heat map, if you will. Don't worry, Texas it's not red like that, it just had the most stories. And a lot of the stories were found around Army installations. So when people in the Pentagon kind of, oh my gosh, this is horrible, this is a horrible crisis we're suffering. Yeah, it's a really bad situation for the Army because housing, this is bad. Children are getting sick. It's something the Army needs to fix. But is it a crisis in the communication side? Within the Army, yes, because we need to tell our families and our soldiers that we're going to fix this. And when that's happening and they hear that and they understand that, hopefully, and we actually follow through. So there's the communication side and then there's what the Army actually does. So as long as we're continuing to communicate what we're doing and we see an impact on that, that's where I want to focus more doing these kinds of assessment, like drilling down into a topic. So the way ahead, we are, what I'd like to do, we've been doing the by priority. I would like to focus more on the issues that arise, the rollouts and announcements that the Army is doing. We spend a lot of time figuring out, new fitness test. Who needs to know this? All the checks. How did we do getting that out? Did the message get out? Was it understood? And we found with that was not understood. There were a lot of questions, and those got answered over social media. So really, the things we're trying to communicate, our deliberate communication. And then when we have our monthly plan and we have something specific we're trying to communicate, how well did that do? Also taking into account the external environment. Obviously, that's always happening out there. It's not that people aren't going to talk about this thing because something else is happening, but people's attention may be diverted. Or if it's something that impacts the Army that we may or may not have had any say in it, we didn't have an opportunity, at least in the beginning, to comment on it. So that's where I want to kind of focus our efforts. I think I think I missed one. Yeah, the initial, like talent management and those kinds of things that moving forward, this is where we want to focus our effort. Yes, it's reform. Yes, it's modernization, but it's really this topic, if you will. And we've talked numerous times about accessions and recruiting and how that's important across the Army. So I know AMRG and recruiting, and there's a lot of other people involved in that, but we have a role in it as well. Just on the communication side, setting the conditions that help the recruiters. I mean, there's so much that we can all play into that, and I think we need to measure that and make sure that we're more aligned. And discussions I've had with General Hanna, this is more the direction I think we're going to be going. And the leader engagement, and the part of with the challenges is putting in the leader engagement. When a leader goes out and talks, the audience they're talking to, the messages they're delivering, how do I weight that against a Reuters story about Army housing, good or bad? It's finding all these different things and trying to say how well we did or didn't do or where we need to improve on communicating any given message, any given topic to any given audience. So that's something that we're kind of struggling through at the moment. And then the various tools, we have a lot of the media analytics tools, and there's a lot of social media, a lot of stuff costs money. Everybody's doing it differently, different reports, all the social media reports we get they all look a little different. So if I'm trying to take from each person and put it all together and make sense of it, that's something we're kind of struggling with as well. And the surveying of the audiences that helps give us that baseline, as Kamil talked about, we are finding ways to get some information on the audiences, because without that, showing any impact is going to be really hard. We can kind of measure the awareness because we know what we put out there and if it reached, and we make a lot of assumptions that it was read or seen, but what impact that made on the audience, that's that key thing that we're trying to find right now. So that was that's the basis of our assessments. That's what we're doing right now and kind of our way ahead. I know I've gotten a lot of questions before. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and it's all been very good, and kind of going back through that and figuring out and making sense and pulling it all together. So we welcome this guy, by the way, is leaving. Friday's his last day. He's heading up to Fort Drum. What's that?
Mic drop.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll be back to myself, so go easy on me. But I do welcome your feedback and input on how we're doing this. I've heard from a lot of different people, like I said already, and I do welcome the comments. I'm a career communicator, not an analyst, so I'm coming at it from that perspective. But I know, as you heard the secretary say, we need to be able to show our impact and show what we're doing and measuring how well we're doing. So it's something that will be important to all of us. Any questions? Yes, right here.
Corps of Engineers, sit down. You're done. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, it's off the table for us too. We've already, yeah.
So what is it that we can do at the lower level, first of all, trying to influence those commanders on our impact stuff, to show that data, what data should be grabbing, and not just be on engagement and reach, two elements in Facebook and grab the worst to actually assess.
Are you talking on the social media or anything?
In general, the social media is one of the ones that's,
Do you want to?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, what core district? Norfolk? Fantastic. I used to be your deputy PAO up at USACE headquarters. I dealt with the pipeline. So the pipeline was awesome. So I think for you, one thing that I would almost like recommend, and it's almost like you can go out with your district commander, should be a 06 or 1-star, and if he's doing an engagement with people, nothing I say would stop you from going up to people individually afterwards and kind of asking them a question. Just do some anecdotal comments like, hey, what'd you think of what he said? Or if you're right next to him, he's engaging and he's getting handshakes and people are saying, that was fantastic, thank you very much. Write that down. I think those anecdotal statements, I think, are more powerful and more impactful than just data points. And then you can go back and, excuse me, I think you can use those anecdotal statements in future briefings or future talking points and future speeches for your kind of commander. So I think nothing kind of stops you from going there and just kind of talking to individuals. Because you're right, you would need OPM if you want to do a survey. But we have also met some individuals at West Point called the Army Music Analytics Team. They're supposed to evaluate the return on investment on Army bands. Congress was not happy, GAO report, stand up a 3-person band team. Here's money, partner with West Point, you have access to academia, all the ORSAs and the PhDs over there. But because they're partnered with West Point, they can partner with Nielsen. Because Nielsen can be like, oh, look, we did a study with West Point. This is fantastic. And so when a band now will go do a performance for a future Meet Your Army or Focus 22 city, we can partner with Army Music Analytics, say like, hey, they're going to Pittsburgh. Band's performing at these 2 dates over these 4 dates. What tools can you bring to rate the return on investment for that band performance? But also, there's a general speaking before, after the band. What can you do? They can bring in tablets. They can bring in SMS text messaging, I was told. They can reach out to Nielsen. So they can do some micro surveys, micro targeting, because they were told to do that by the Army. So
And it doesn't just have to be bands.
doesn't have to be bands.
They started
So
it with bands, all this stuff that they have, all these tools. But they came to us saying, we have all these tools that let's see if we can work together on this. So it's well beyond just the bands.
Surveys are like really fantastic. AUSA, I walked around with my smartphone, Google Forms, and I went to Army officers or anyone Army and DA civilian asking them questions. And I got approval from Army Research Institute. Like, you're asking what? Oh, you're asking these 5 communication questions? To which, perfect, you can't. I could not do the industry people, but I could still do. So if you think you have an internal Army set of communication questions you want to ask your USACE workers in Norfolk, that'll be actually very easy to do. Now, technically, you can also do one-off questions on Facebook.
And also, if I chime in on that, not expecting surveying from you guys to do that, if that's where you're going. Any survey data we get, or we're pulling, begging, and borrowing from other people, we most definitely can share that. And again, it goes to what's missing, and then you could say, okay, if these are the things Army's trying to look at or Army's trying to get to, those things don't have anything to do with me at the Corps of Engineers, but these do. I can touch on these things. Then it gives you an idea of something to focus on, possibly in addition to whatever messages and other things you're trying to communicate. So it's not that we're asking you to do our work for us, but what makes sense at your command, at your agency, to help guide your communication as well. I don't know if that answered that. Any other? Oop, down here in front.
Just one suggestion. For APO, so we have a small unit, we take sentiment on like social media comments and kind of graph that and build it out to positive, negative, and track that.
How often do you do that? Are you looking every day, or are you just sampling? Okay. No, that's great.
But then also anecdotally, the negative comments that go
Yep.
in front of the commander, he can make a decision on how to talk to that down. Measure no comment, well, we measure that goes in the engagement data. We use that internally for what kind of content.
Yeah, I was just going to say that helps you with your content for sure.
And
If
you probably
nobody's
have a lot of-
engaging, then, but if you get a lot of engagement on a certain content, then, okay, this is what works, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So, Fort Dock Income headquarters, so
God bless you. God bless you, Army Housing.
thank you. I showed up to leaders for the no, so I've been at commands where I've used KPI. I've used Meltwater. I love it, but it's hit or miss. It depends on who has funding. Is there not a way to make this a Army enterprise that Army purchases it and gives us access? Because I think it's not only going to be that if Army owns it, OCPA owns it, gives the keys out to each of the commands, senior commands, we can get in there, you can see all of our data, and we can then also pull it too, because it gives us credibility to turn around, give to our senior leaders and say, hey sir, hey ma'am, here's the ROI. And it's not just because I pulled it hodgepodge from the Facebook analytics, from the free service there, and my,
Yeah, yeah.
and I can't even access Google Forms on my network anymore, so I can't even pull that free service. I'm just pulling this out of God only knows where. So to me, using those services at all of our levels,
I think that's we've been thinking about that and talking about that, and I'm hoping that now's the time that we could put that forward. I actually maybe would welcome suggestions. I know Kamil has a ton from his Georgetown schooling, like what kind of tools are really good. I'm not good on that, but if you all have used things in the past that you say, hey, this is a really good one, we can take, and we can just do some research and figure out, how much money it would cost, and just lay it out and just say, hey, in order for us to, and then to all be on the same, using the same tool. Using, yeah.
That's what we need at all levels. That's
Yep.
at echelon.
Yeah.
We need that because it goes back to everything we just talked about with Vice and SecRB yesterday. Showing our value added. This is
Yep.
a measurable way to show that.
Yeah. Nope, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? Everybody's ready to go get a beer? No, I'm just kidding.
It is 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. We'll be around if anybody has any other questions. So thanks. What's that? I didn't say free.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think it's probably like a key takeaway from